Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Anomaly Sea Ice Challenge with the transhumanist Paragons of Pandroth. And we kick things off right away here with a group of travelers passing by and with Vulek detecting another steel source. That is something we've been desperately searching for, although it is somewhat unfortunately placed. What we also locate, mostly by accident here, is a polar bear, reminding me to remind you of the Polar Bears International fundraiser we still have going on, which is actually getting very close to hitting $5,000 in donations, so thank you for that. This is honestly way more than I had ever expected. At this point, perhaps also a quick recap of the last episode as we hover over Lauren here, a genie who we recruited last time around, in an episode that also saw us get overrun by side stealers, not to mention that we were very occupied trying to detect a Metalhorror, a dangerous entity that had taken up residence inside of our ghoul Midnight. Thanks to a quest reward, we were also able to turn Ellie into a level 1 Psycaster, that is why she gets a meditation spot here, and the Void Provocation ritual has also become available once more, so as always it's time to live, love and provoke the void, a task that Elpis will hopefully complete after our guests have left the map. And there we go, the ritual is complete, and yes, the visitors have left already. And so, while Elpis recovers from another brief psychic coma, we now wait for the next entity to appear. Once again though, and I seem to recall that this was already an issue we ran into a few episodes back, nothing happens, although the Void Provocation ritual is actually supposed to spawn something within 4 hours of its completion. Now, obviously it might be that it has simply spawned another Metalhorror, Side Stealers or a Revenant. Those would be entities that we do not get informed about immediately. However, I have done a bit of research and testing on this, and it could also be a problem tied to colony wealth. Simply put, we are just not rich enough at the moment for the game to be able to create those more dangerous entities. And at the moment, because of the tests I was able to run with this save file, that seems to be the case. Although of course this should not stop us from provoking the void anytime we get a chance to. In the meantime, we have received another quest, and one that I do not think should pose too much of a threat to us. Yes, a psychic suppressor is a nasty little thing, but I think one of our ghouls alone should be able to handle 5 man-hunting cats protecting it, so we will take this, although up first let's get our steel production back up and running, just so our colony does not come to a complete halt. Right, so considering our PBI campaign for this series, this is now a bit unfortunate. For a lack of food, the polar bear we spotted earlier has now decided to hunt Ellie, and well, while I would like to protect polar bears at almost all costs, those costs unfortunately do not include the loss of who could very well become the leader of the settlement. And so the bear has to go down and then ironically is turned into food for us afterwards. Our tough ghoul Jay then also takes out a snow hare that had wandered in, and so the sea ice is once again completely devoid of life, with the exception of course of our small shelter. That shelter, however, possibly about to expand soon, as the deep drill is now in place, fueled by a battery for now, and we will make the switch to a more permanent power solution shortly. The thing is, we need steel to actually build it. However, thanks to Maniac's mining skill of 18, that steel is quickly acquired, and so on the next morning, Vulek puts the finishing touches on another chem fuel-powered generator that will allow us to use the deep drill at any time of the day, and we can turn it on and off as we please to save on fuel. Of course, all of that mining will not take care of itself, and Maniac going into a sad wander here certainly does not help. And with this particular mental break here being caused by him being in pain, I think he might make for a good candidate to receive some body part replacements next. And who knows, maybe the exotic goods trader here even has some of them for sale. Before we can trade with them though, we first finish the research of wake-up production, and let's complete the trifecta here and unlock Goju's as well. I suppose a transhumanist colony would not be opposed to enhancing their skills through these kinds of means. The trader then does in fact have a few interesting items on offer, unfortunately though we lack the funds to purchase most of them. What we will grab though is a gene pack including the cold super tolerant gene. That could actually be huge for us because it means that we no longer need Parkers on everyone. In exchange then we are selling the Almanac of Shadows, which has caused so many problems. For the time being, let's stick to books that do not cause mental breaks. Afterwards then, with 1 second left on the Psychic Suppressor quest, let's accept it. And let's stick to the theme of gene modding and grab the Archite capsule as a reward. In the background you can already see Ellie finishing the drop pod, and that one will be needed in just a second as the psychic suppressor site has just appeared. Now the problem with this site is that it is in the middle of the sea ice and protected by wild animals, which could mean that we won't find enough steel on site to make a drop pod for the return trip. Now, we'll worry about that in a moment. For now, we unlock void sculptures, so we now have the means to increase our ritual quality, and especially for the draw animals ritual, that will be very helpful, considering that we do of course not want that to spawn manhunters half of the time. Moving on then, we will focus our efforts on disruptor flares. As the description here says, these are flare packs used to reveal invisible creatures, and considering that the Revenant a few episodes ago was not exactly easy to take down, this might be a worthwhile investment. Up next then, we will accept another quest, this one we received last episode. Once again, we will be attacking Waster Pirates of the Pollution Gang, who are quietly becoming our #1 enemy in this playthrough, although the raid here will have to wait for a while. Now what we are also doing is we are hauling the corpse of the dead Woodmaker Dryad into safety. I'm actually still trying to come up with a way of how we might make that one useful for us, because resurrecting it as a shambler won't be a permanent solution, and likely will not last long enough for it to produce any wood. At the moment, the best I can come up with is that we need to wait for another death pall, then we put it out into the open, wait for it to be revived as an enemy shambler, and hope that we can incapacitate it without killing it so that we can capture it. Should all of that succeed, it would then reliably produce wood in our containment facility. Until then, it remains under lock and key, just so the body does not fully deteriorate. Now, if you have a better idea, let me know in the comments, but for now it's time to load our drop pod. We will send our tough ghoul J alongside Vulek, and even though the chance is slim, we are going to give them some chem fuel and components for a potential return trip. However, we also pack some meals, just in case that they have to return on foot. As the transport pod then touches down, it is time for J to immediately venture forward. As you can see, as soon as we arrive, the manhunting cats are making a beeline straight for us. And unfortunately, the building housing the psychic suppressor is also made from wood, and we will probably also not find too many items inside, so finding enough steel for both a transport pod and a pod launcher could prove difficult. However, let's worry about that once we have actually cleared the map. For now, Vulek is keeping a safe distance, which does put Jay at the risk of friendly fire, so let's move a bit closer. Our ghoul does have his hands full after all. And there we go, that's all 5 cats taken down. Jay has taken a bit of a beating. The psychic suppressor machine, meanwhile, easily accessible, although it could take some time until we have it destroyed. A few hours into the process, we receive word that advanced psychic rituals have been unlocked, our very first advanced anomaly project. This now unlocks shard beacons, another way to increase ritual quality, and because I consider it to be pretty important, we will now pool both our basic and advanced research into disruptor flares. That's an item that I think we should have access to as soon as possible. And there we go, the psychic suppressor has been destroyed, leaving behind a component, some steel and plasteel, although again, sadly not enough for a drop pod. So Vulek and Jay will have to walk back home, and that will take some time, about 2 days I think. And one thing that Vulek certainly does not want to have happen during that time is for Jay to get hungry. So let's kill the Arctic wolf here and have Jay feed on it. Ghouls can actually eat quite a lot and don't require that much food. Still, this is most likely not going to keep him fed for the entire trip, but hopefully for long enough to keep things from getting dicey. And with everyone well fed, we can then send our small party back home. Seems like Vulek also still had some components left in his inventory. And no, we are not going to take any steel back home with us. After all, we have found a good source again, and it would only slow us down. So 2.3 days, that is how long the journey will take. In the meantime, it has become evening at our home base, where Ellie is now constructing our first shard beacon from a shard and bioferrite, an increase of 8% to psychic ritual quality. However, what we need to make sure of is that the beacon does not actually block the ritual area. Unlike regular rituals, these psychic ones do require a bit more space. And you know, while we're at it, let us use that improved ritual quality right away. With the shard beacon, we are now down to a 40% chance of manhunters. Still not great, but let's see what happens. Okay, and this time it's going to be manhunters, that's for sure. Let's only hope that it's not a horde of snow hares. With only one ghoul to defend us, that could be a bit tricky. And, well, what can I say, it's polar bears yet again, possibly here to avenge the death of their fallen comrade. As we then send out our fighters to meet them, our comms console also catches fire, but thankfully that is quickly taken care of and we can, albeit reluctantly, begin the hunt. Honestly, in light of that PBI fundraiser, it would have been very nice had we been able to complete this series without ever killing a single polar bear. And up until today's episode, I had hoped that we might be able to achieve that, but perhaps we can use this senseless killing as an inspiration for our next ideology reform, have our pawns see the errors of their ways and adopt polar bears as our venerated animals. I think that would make some sense storyline-wise, especially since at least Maniac also lived around bears in the cold bog. This time around though, death is the only possible outcome for these poor souls. Our ghoul Midnight takes a few scratches, but nothing too serious, and so life continues as usual on the following morning. With Ellie and Maniac both trading shifts at the deep drill, we also have Steel coming in at a rather steady pace. And apparently that's not the only thing we've got incoming, as shortly after we've slaughtered those polar bears, 2 Yaks have wandered in and decided to join us. So, first things first, let's give them names, as always, chosen from the list of patron supporters in the naming rights tier and above: Jude after patron Jude92 and Don after patron Don Russell. Now, they are pen animals, so we need to construct one for them. That's as easy as putting down a pen marker in our former prison though. And with the 2 of them on the map for barely an hour, we also learn that Jude is already pregnant. Now, a small problem arises when it comes to actually handling them. Normally, Lauren here would qualify for that, with a level 6 animal skill with double passion. However, she is unfortunately also incapable of doing animal work, and looking at the skills of our remaining colonists, that means that the job will inevitably fall to Ellie, who can then lead the 2 Yaks back home in the late afternoon. Now at this point you might ask yourselves, how are we going to feed them? As feeding them with raw rice would feel awfully wasteful, even though we have plenty of the stuff at the moment. The answer to that question is nutrient paste, albeit with the help of a little mod. Unfortunately, it is somehow not possible for pawns to use the nutrient paste dispenser to create nutrient paste meals to then feed them to animals, even though animals will happily eat nutrient paste meals, just like other meals, and even though pawns will happily do this both for prisoners and patients. So I really don't consider it too much of a change in gameplay mechanics when we now install a mod that lets us create nutrient paste meals with the click of a simple button. Obviously, I would have preferred a way for our colonists to do this themselves, but at least I could not find anything like that. On the next morning then, time for some slight rearrangements, although in just a few minutes this setup will change yet again, as we set our sights on expanding the base. However, after some careful thinking and the return of our caravan in the evening, I have decided that we are not going to do so here. Instead, you can already see some of the plans here, we are going to move our entire base over to the monolith. Now, this may or may not end up being a good idea, but keep in mind that there is some level of roleplay in this series, and at least for now, the monolith has not been more than just a site of curiosity for our colonists. A site that I imagine they would like to be a little closer to. Coincidentally, this also moves us a bit closer to our deep drill, although that one too will of course be exhausted at some point, so this is definitely not the deciding factor. With temperatures then slowly but steadily dropping again, we have another trade ship pass by, so let's send Ellie over to the comms console and see what they have on offer. Now, unfortunately, yet again, we are somewhat lacking in funds, so for now we are just going to sell them a bit of fur and leather. Later then, after moving the orbital trade beacon, we add some clothing items, just to make at least a tiny amount of money. The next few hours, and actually days for that matter, then taken up with our base relocation project, a project that will most likely span over several episodes, simply because we have quite a bit of stuff to construct and then to transfer. And well, I don't think you need any reminder that Nazim and Vulek are apparently allergic to hauling, so all of this could take a while. And that's not to mention that of course both Randy and the Sea Ice will continue to throw challenges our way. In this case, a crashed escape pod including an abrasive artist. She does belong to an at least for now friendly faction though, so it's probably not a good idea to turn her into a ghoul, even though she does not look like the type that we want to recruit. What we want to do, however, is to take her in. Our rice production should be able to feed another mouth, I think, even if that mouth has to be moved midway through, as Lauren now puts up the first walls of our new home. And with the first walls in place, it's time to go double wide on the next morning. This here will become our greenhouse, so it will need to keep the temperature in, and that is ideally without us investing too heavily in heaters. For the most part, the day then remains uneventful until we are informed that our ghouls are starving. And this is unfortunately more than just a slight problem, because a starving ghoul will eventually turn on us. At that point, it is then considered an enemy entity, and while that entity can still be captured, it can then no longer be recruited. And especially in the case of our tough ghoul Jay, that would be a shame. So unless anything or anyone presents themselves, ideally not the person we just rescued, we may need to take drastic measures. And well, sadly, after a few more hours of waiting, the situation is just getting a bit too dicey. So my sincerest apologies to Dawn, this was definitely not how this was supposed to go. Then again, if you give your name to a character in a Rimworld series, I guess there is always a chance of stuff like this happening. So Don Russell, once again, thank you so much for your support. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, and it now goes towards making our ghouls happy. May your spirit live on in your offspring, as we have of course kept Jude, the female, around, while your remains will slowly but steadily be devoured. Now, moving on to happier things, as you can see, our new base is coming along nicely. We are already in the process of moving over our entire hydroponics setup. For the moment, I think we have stockpiled enough rice to last us for a few days without it. Ellie and Maniac also keeping themselves busy at the deep drill, and so we are making good progress, at least until Randy decides to throw us another curveball in the evening. It's been a while since the last raid, and this time we have tribals incoming, 20 of them. A good mixture of melee and ranged weapons, and in some ways it is actually convenient that this is officially a breaching raid, as it forces these few enemies here to advance before the rest of the group, who consequently get themselves killed immediately. And all in all, I would say that we are in a pretty good position to fend this one off, our ghouls at the moment mostly providing target practice for those few ranged enemies. Also, since this is the Sea Ice, none of the enemies here have any cover whatsoever, and at the end of the day they are still only tribals being shot by snipers and charge rifles, so our ghouls hardly need to get involved. And there we go, that's our enemies fleeing without our colonists taking as much as a single scratch of damage. And for the purpose of acquiring enough food for our ghouls to prevent another animal slaughter, we are also shooting down anyone who can still walk. As a matter of fact, we're doing so all the way to the last person, and we're even using some of Vulek's sanguiphage abilities to make sure that they go down. And down they go, dropping 17 units of herbal medicine. And not only that, as a fast walker who's good at plants and combat, they might actually make for a decent addition to our colony. So, after a quick coagulate, Vulek can now repopulate our prison. That prison, by the way, now finds itself under the watchful eyes of Shambler Pete, surrounded by toxic waste. Probably not the best conditions to reduce a resistance score of 51, but perhaps we can convince our prisoner by making her watch the fate of her companion, who we are now going to relieve of their hearts. Now, of course, this is not done out of pure cruelty, we're not like that. The simple reason is that sooner or later Lauren's heart here will become a problem for her, and I suppose this would be the easy way of solving the problem, transhumanist style. This also goes to show that all of our transhumanist efforts are facing one rather important challenge at the moment, and that would be the lack of a proper doctor in our colony. So that's perhaps another item on the ever-growing list of things to do for the Paragons of Pandroth. For today at least, we can see that the basics of a new base are ready to be filled, so in the next episode I think it will be time to move. For this one, meanwhile, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut. One quick note, when this video goes up, I will already be taking a short vacation, and the same thing will be true when the next episode goes up. So anything you send in terms of comments or fan art for episodes 9 and 10, I will likely only be able to include that for episode 11. Which of course does not mean that you shouldn't send me anything, it just means that you might need to be a bit patient until it's featured. And with that, let's wrap things up. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.